and welcome to Students Abroad. I'm your host Aayushi Seth, and today we will talk about international student support. As my first guest, I have Darshan Pawani in studio, who is an international student and a former president of Indian Graduate Student Society. Hi Darshan, thank you so much for being here. So Darshan, how did Indian Graduate Student Society help international students during COVID and the whole mess into 2020?
Well, when we went into the COVID phase, it was difficult for everyone, and we had students reaching out to us for support in whatever means we could. It's not financially, but in different ways, in terms of mental health as well as support with groceries and things like that. And that was the time we decided that it's great to reach out to the outer community. We had a few connections outside where we got in touch with the local gurudwaras, the different non-profit organizations, and that's where we gathered some effective support.
Yeah.
We had conversations with them via Zoom, and we realized that there was a potential where we could actually have groceries being delivered to students.
Okay.
But because of the COVID times, we couldn't really travel. And one of the things that we did at that point of time was to figure out a particular place where we could accumulate all the grocery, and we could then redistribute it to different students. And that's how we went ahead with that.
Wow, that's a great initiative. So was this support just limited to Indian international students?
Well, since we had taken the external support from Indian community organizations, they really wanted to help the Indian international students. However, they were pretty open to helping out the other students as well, because as we all know, we are all in this together.
Yeah.
So it's not just specific to one community, it's for everyone in general. So at any point of time, if we had registrations coming in from students other than Indians, we would definitely accept that.
That's great. So Darshan, how beneficial is it for international students to join these ethnic groups and student societies? And how does it benefit?
I think it's really important to be a part of these ethnic student societies at universities, because being an international student myself, I had this thing about exploring cultures, making new friends when I come to a new country. But let's not forget that the first couple of weeks are stressful.
Yeah.
When you're looking out for accommodation, when you're looking out for friends, it's the people of your own country that make you feel home.
Yeah.
And these ethnic student societies that are there in the universities actually do this work for you. They get you to connect with people who are from your same country, same background, and maybe your potential flatmates as well.
Yeah, true.
So,
but do you think it dissuades, in some aspect, international students who actually, get to know different cultures because they're so in their comfort zone, even in Australia?
Well, I've seen 3 different types of people. One of them, they stick to the ethnic student society, like you said, whereas there are a few students who prefer to mingle with the local population from the very beginning itself. However, we've also seen a trend where students join these student organizations, get to know their own community people, give them the hope, and take them along for networking events where they can mingle with the outside culture people.
Wow, and I think that's the right way to go about it.
Exactly.
Right. I know you have done a lot of volunteer work in your student life. How has it benefited you, and what do you suggest for, other international students who are currently, due to COVID, studying from home or maybe hoping to come into Australia?
Well, the only advice I think I would be giving people is that you need to be switched on at all times. You cannot give up on any of the opportunities that come your way. So I wouldn't shy out before telling that I have the FOMO, the fear of missing out, where I pounced out on almost every opportunity that came my way. And in an international country, I really feel that that's the way to go about this. You do not give up on your dreams. Just achieve whatever you want, and every opportunity that comes your way, just grab that.
Wow. Okay. So, my last question to you is, what were some of the myths or stereotypes you had before coming to Australia, and how did they break, and what's the reality like?
Well, we were all aware about the conditions back in Australia in 2010 or 11, where there was issues with racism and inequality and things like that. But then, though the time has gone ahead and we've all grown over this, I think it's our parents who are a little more concerned. They still feel that there might be something wrong about it, and they feel uncomfortable. So that's a myth. You have to forget what happened in the past, move on with life, and yes, there are a lot of new challenges here in terms of housing and making new friends, etc. You just need to find your way out, and I think you'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I think that was a very inspiring conversation with Darshan. Stay tuned for our next segment with Jared Holland from Outcome Live, and I'll see you then.
With over 20 years of combined recruitment experience, Bastion is your trusted advisor for sourcing leaders. Technical experts in supply chain recruitment, Bastion uses a proven customer-focused delivery. Speak to a consultant today for your recruitment needs. Bastion, experts in sourcing leaders that deliver change.
Hi, welcome to the next segment of Students Abroad. Now we have with us Jared Holland from Outcome Life. Thank you for being here, Jared. My first question to you is, you support international students with one of the most crucial aspects of their life in Australia, that's internships and employment. What are some of the key resources that Outcome supports international students with?
Yeah, so Outcome.life was founded to try and bridge that gap between university and actually getting a job. So my view on the reason why someone would go and get a degree, most people, is you want a job at the end. So if you're going to spend $50, $60, $120,000 to get a degree, your goal is actually the job. So if we jump straight to the job part and work backwards, what are the skills you need to be able to get a job? And what we worked out was that doing a work placement as part of your degree is probably, I think, the most important part of your education. And we were right back in 2015, because now all the unis are embedding work placements into their degrees. And so a core part of our service is facilitating that internship placement. The reason why we have a focus on international students is because it's harder for international students. And there's one main reason for that. They don't have a network here in Australia. I was born in Melbourne. I've lived in Melbourne nearly my whole life. I know thousands and thousands of people in Melbourne. One phone call, I can open up doors for myself. International students left that network back home. So they got no one to pick up the phone or to make introductions for themselves. And that's what we do. So if students are doing an internship as part of their degree or part of curriculum, they often might need to go and find their own internship. We work with the universities, in partnership with the universities, where we'll facilitate that internships for them. We vet the companies, we make sure that they're safe, we make sure they're good quality, we make sure they're doing the right type of work. So as a mechanical engineer is doing mechanical engineering related work in their internship. We look after all the compliance, and the whole matching process is taken care of through our software. So big part is we try and help international students get job. The stepping stone of the job is doing an internship.
Wow, that's great. But to secure these internships or say employment, the crucial step is CV. What are few mistakes that people often make while they're writing the CVs?
I think the first myth is that everyone thinks the CV is the most important part. It's actually not. You don't get a CV. You don't get a job with your CV. You get a job in the interview. But a lot of students, they'll focus tens and tens of hours trying to perfect a CV. And they don't do any practice about in an interview. You and I having a chat right now is far more important than any bit of paper I put in front of you, because we're going to get to know each other in person. So yes, CVs are important. You need to have one. But ideally you get a job without it ever coming down to the CV. And what I mean by that is that we have hired 5 people in the last 6 weeks. I have not seen any of their CVs. Literally have not seen their CVs. Steph, our COO, found the candidates, some through our own network. I looked up their LinkedIn profile though, and I had a conversation with them. So CVs, make sure you put the effort in, make sure you've got it. You need it as a ticket to the game, but it's everything else about you that's actually going to help you get a job. In an ideal world, you've met someone at a networking event or someone's referred you to them and you've had a warm introduction. Your CV gets pushed aside. And remember that hiring managers will look at your CV for less than 10 seconds. Seriously, less than 10 seconds. So LinkedIn is really important. A lot of international students do not understand that LinkedIn is super important in Australia. I will spend 10 minutes on someone's LinkedIn profile and I'll spend 3 seconds on their CV.
Yeah.
Right? It's harder to lie on LinkedIn. It's actually got more valuable information on it. And the best thing on LinkedIn is I can see who you're connected to.
Right.
So if you're applying for a job with me, first thing I would do is I'd see, who do I know that you know? Oh, I see that you know one of someone that I'm connected to. I'll call them up and say, hey, can you please tell me about Aayushi?
Wow.
I don't need the CV anymore. I'm getting first-hand knowledge about what you're like. So don't worry, you need a CV. There's other things more important, your network, LinkedIn, and being able to present yourself in an interview.
Wow. Well, I'm getting a lot of questions from what you just told me, but my first question would be, in an interview, obviously communication skills are the most important. Like it's soft skills and things that we employers talk about. So do you help your students and international students to actually develop those skills at Outcome?
Yeah, we've actually just launched a program called Career Catalyst with the Victorian Government, where we actually do CV and LinkedIn training. We run workshops on perfecting a LinkedIn profile. We do interview coaching. We've got a short course you can do on getting ready for an interview. And then we run workshops to prepare you for an interview. So we've sort of taken a whole portfolio of those skills that you require, and we put it into a program with the Victorian Government. So it's at outcome.life/career catalyst. For any Victorian international student, it's free.
Wow, that's great. What about international students who want to start, who want to be entrepreneurs and want to start their own businesses? How does Outcome support these budding entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so we love startups and we love entrepreneurship, and Don, my business partner, just loves startups. And so 3 years ago, we started a startup pre-accelerator for international students.
Okay.
And the reason why we did that is we saw all these incubators and startup programs being launched, and very few international students ever made it in because it was really tough to get in. So we thought, well, let's just do one and make it for international students.
Wow.
And so we're actually running again in the 15th of March. It starts again for the 3rd time running. But any international student that has any idea whatsoever, you can go and apply, and we don't care if your idea is any good. If it's crap, it doesn't matter. The fact that you've got an idea and you're ready to start practicing what it's like to be an entrepreneur and going through that process. The process is the most important part. We have a startup pre-accelerator tailored for international students.
That's great. Well, a lot of international students actually choose their area of study depending on employability and the industry. So what are some of the upcoming and trending professions that you would suggest to look into?
Yeah, so the obvious ones, technology, data, security, very popular. So accounting's sort of on the way out, and everything's moving towards tech, software, and those type of skills. I do find a lot of international students, though, choose their degrees based on migration. So this is for me, it's a big watch out. I think it's silly to go and work in a field that you hate so you can live somewhere, but you're living somewhere doing work you hate. That makes no sense to me, but I was lucky enough to be born in Australia, so I get it. It's not always fair. But I think in terms of choosing what degree you want to do, start to think about what you think you're good at. And I think that's a good starting point. I think some people say do what you're passionate about. I don't think that makes sense. If you're good at something, you'll end up being passionate about it. But you've got to start with the end in mind. So before you enroll in a degree, rather than thinking about what you're going to do for your degree, try and work out what you do after the degree in that type of job. It could be civil engineering, for instance. Try and find people who are a civil engineer and go and have coffee with them and just ask them what it's like being a civil engineer, right? So jump to the end first and then work your way backwards, as opposed to blindly going into doing a 3-year degree and you get to year 2 and you think, I hate this.
Wow, that's a lot of information to take in. But my last question would be, what are the few tips that you would like to give international students who are finding their first job in Australia?
Network, and network. Like everything happens through people who you know, and that doesn't matter if you're living in Delhi or Mumbai or Jakarta. It doesn't matter. Everything happens through people like who you know. And in some cultures, I've been to India and I've seen how the Indian families all support each other. The same thing happens in Australia. People look after people who they already know. So you've got to work 4 times harder on your professional network than a local person does, because I've got schoolmates and parents of schoolmates and cousins and aunties and uncles and grandparents. So networking is the most important thing you can do. It does a couple of things. One, you're building your brand out there, and you're getting to learn lots of people, but you're increasing the scope of the things that you know about and what you like to do and what you don't like to do. So for every hour you spend studying, you should spend on your network.
On your networking. Wow, that was a great chat. And what I personally take away from this is network, network, and network. Thank you so much for being here, Jared. I will see you in my next segment, where we'll be joined by Dharmendra Patel, who is the CEO of Aussies Group. Stay tuned.
With over 20 years of combined recruitment experience, Bastion is your trusted advisor for sourcing leaders. Technical experts in supply chain recruitment, Bastion uses a proven customer-focused delivery. Speak to a consultant today for your recruitment needs. Bastion, experts in sourcing leaders that deliver change.
Welcome back to the last segment of Students Abroad. Now we have with us, joining in the studio, Dharmendra Patel, Managing Director and CEO of Aussies Group. Thank you so much, Dharmendra, for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting the show.
Yes. Well, I know that you were an international student when you came to Australia. And what was your journey and what inspired you to actually start the Aussies Group?
So, frankly, I was like, when I was an international student, yes, I had great experience being a student in Australia, and I seen a fantastic life here, But frankly, like, I wanted to settle back in India, and when I had a career choice, I thought like, okay, this can be the very good profession to enter in, where I can actually help the international student to come to Australia. So I actually did immigration and immigration law and practice, and I started myself as a registered migration education consultant, back in India. So that was my starting point, but I enjoyed Aussie's journey a lot.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I think you guys are doing some fabulous work. Well, we know that education, especially in Australia, is the third largest export industry, and it's profoundly hit by COVID. Do you think Australian is late to realize the value of education industry?
I think certainly, the Australia has done a great job in pandemic. In fact, getting out of this particular COVID situation. But one thing which was a disappointing was not realizing the importance of the international student and looking at the situation of the students, how they are actually suffering. Because any international student, when they come to Australia, they come up with the hopes and expectation.
Yes.
Obviously, Australia since many years, promoting their educations based on their experience. International education is Australian international education is already known in the market. The universities are well known around the world, and the quality of education is great. But at the same time, why the international students coming to Australia is their cultural exposure, and at the same time the opportunity what Australia is giving to the international student in terms of the work. But this time when the COVID hit, many students may struggle to find a job. Many students who complete their study, they actually couldn't expose themselves into the industry because a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of business has been affected. So international students actually couldn't get that exposure, and I think the government did try in their way a little bit in terms of giving the flexibility of granting the temporary visa from the offshore. The students are offshore, but in terms of the compensation period, what the student has missed out in terms of completing their study, and they have actually spent their gracious period, which was about to experience themselves into the industry, has been lost into the COVID period.
Yes.
And I think there was no compensation. The students who were actually struggling to study in campuses for the cultural exposure, I think they've been studying online since last 10 years, and I think they also not been given any compensation in relation to that. The students who are coming from overseas, and a lot of students has got the visa last year, and there's no clear guidelines when the borders will be open and when they will be invited onshore, because no one wants to study online. As most of the students, when they choose Australia as a destination, it's not about just the qualification, it's about the cultural exposure and experiencing Australia as a country. So while they have to study online, they're not happy what actually it seems to be. The students are waiting when the Australia will be open, their borders. But I think the international students are into least priority for the government, and I think that's a very sad news,
That's very
from the
sad.
Australia side.
Yeah, like you said, there are so many students who wish to come to Australia to study, and I know so many of my friends want to come here. What is your suggestion to students who are hoping to come to Australia? When should they apply? What should they, look at?
See, I would say that pretty much always like the visa grant ratio and all those stuff like in Australia, because Australia always been in demand, So many times it happened that the genuine student even get the visa refusals based on like silly reasons, because the Australian Department of Immigration, based on the supply, and they've been always strict and stringent in their criteria, So I think this is a good time for getting the visa, because there is not much of supply what Australia is expecting. Every university needs number, and I think the immigration department is little bit of lenient in terms of the granting the visa, as in compare of the normal period, obviously.
Wow, that's great news.
So I would say that like if anyone is actually concerned about the visa grant thing, I think this is the right time when they can actually apply for visa. But on the contrary, the thing is that like if they will get the visa, they're supposed to actually start study online. Okay. So obviously like they will miss out like 1 or 2 semester to be in Australia to study that particular period. And another thing is that like last year we were hoping that like the border will be open by March, but this COVID situation unexpected. So we never know that like what's going to happen and when the border is going to open, and as there is no such positive vibes coming from the government where they're actually announcing any such concrete plan where when they're going to actually invite the international student, and in fact like they have tried like few trial programs, and most of the time like because of some cluster into the New South Wales and Victoria, they have cancelled those programs, So I think that was very negative news in relation to the international students. But I would say that like if the students are happy to spend 1 or 2 semester online and then they can actually come to the Australia, I think it's the right time to apply for visa, because the visa grant could be like much better in compare of other normal period, but they have to make sure that like they can't expect soon to be in Australia, as Australia is preferring their citizens to be over international students, and so the international student has to wait for it.
Well, thank you so much for your answer. I think that's going to help a lot of students. My next question to you is about the group of 8 universities. When I was coming to Australia, a lot of my consultants were telling me to apply for a group of 8 universities because they're somewhat better. But now I'm here, and I don't see a difference, except for there is a lot of difference in the fee structure. So what, according to you, is the actual difference, and what should be the selection criteria when students are coming to Australia?
So see, like a group of 8 universities, because they've been very popular and they've been always like, the front face of Australia, and obviously like in media and international level, they have a very good exposure, And that's the reason like all the bright students, when they actually choose to come to Australia, their first preference goes to the group 8 university. And I think like somewhere because of their popularity and their demands, and because of it, like, their fees are into like very high. So basically their fees are very high, as they know that like they are actually getting enough supply, even though their fees are high. But as you say that like when you come to Australia and then you actually don't see that much of difference, studying in a group at university and compare of like other universities, Why? Because I would say that like when the international student comes to Australia, normally what happens, like first thing what they concern is about their qualification and the recognition of the qualification.
That's right,
But apart from that, why they are coming to Australia? Why they are not actually studying any top universities within their country? Why they are not going to nearby country where there are also many top universities which is more competitive and reasonable, in compare of group 8 universities, which is also like equivalent popular like group 8 universities, So students are coming to Australia not just for the qualification, but for the cultural exposure, and many other things, like they want to experience the lifestyle into like on campuses, Now, if you see the university campuses of Australian universities, you will see like there are almost every university has great campuses available. They have
beautiful campuses.
They have excellent infrastructure. So regardless, it's like RMIT, Deakin University, Latrobe University. You will see all those universities who are not into group 8 universities. They are also actually concerned about the experience of international student. And they have invested a lot because they also been very popular, and they're also making a good revenue from the international students. So they are actually investing really great into the infrastructure.
Okay.
So I would say that like in terms of the campus lifestyle, I won't you won't see much difference, as the qualifications certainly will be recognized, but you see that like when you goes to the job market, people actually nowadays, mostly employers, they are looking for your attitude over your qualification. And I think that's why, like, if you're brilliant, regardless which university you study, and if you have great attitude, you will get your job,
Yeah.
So once you actually start your journey as a in your career, it depends how you perform, So basically, like I'm a Deakin University graduate, and what I learned from the university is not about the subject, what I studied, but about like, exposure, what I got, so, and that actually exposure and that experience helped me to build my business around, So you see that like even I'm not a group 8 university students, but I still did well in my career. So everything's thanks to the Australian university system, but you're very much right, there is not much difference in terms of the experience as a student, but those universities are more in demand, so obviously their fees are high.
Thank you for your answer. I think it was a great explanation. My last question to you, and that's a very important question for me, and I know for a lot of students, international students in Australia, and also people on their TR. When can we safely go back home and come back to Australia?
See, when you can go safely back to home, so that like at the moment, like Australian political scenarios like that, where there is a very, very, very much restriction in terms of the incoming traveling,
Yes.
So you can go anytime, you can actually make yourself to travel overseas. That's not a problem at this stage, as far as like the overseas countries allowing you to come. So basically the home countries allowing you to come back home,
Yes.
The problem here is like the Australia's incoming traveling has a very much restriction, and their first preference is their citizen, So if you travel overseas and if you are a temporary holder, you will goes into like, last category to come back, So I think that's the reason like most of the students who are onshore, and if they are actually experiencing that like their visa is about to expire, and if they will be in overseas, it will be very hard for them to extend their visa, because it's always, everyone knows that like when you are onshore within Australia and if your visa is expiring, it's easy process to extend and apply for a further visa, work it out your visa options. But when you're offshore, it's completely different scenario. So I would say that like until there is not much restriction lifted in terms of the overseas travel, and the borders will be open for good for the international students, I don't think so the students can actually travel overseas.
Travel home. Well, that's sad. We'll have to wait for a long time.
Yes.
But thank you so much for all the information that you've given me. I think it was a very, very valuable segment. Thank you all for watching this episode, and we'll be back very soon with another episode of Students Abroad. Stay tuned.
With over 20 years of combined recruitment experience, Bastion is your trusted advisor for sourcing leaders. Technical experts in supply chain recruitment, Bastion uses a proven customer-focused delivery. Speak to a consultant today for your recruitment needs. Bastion, experts in sourcing leaders that deliver change.